Hello and welcome to your weekly roundup on ThePapare.com of the Dialog Rugby A-Division League action over the last weekend. We had plenty of interesting games and also looking forward. These games would send us a little bit of an indication how things are going to go in the league going forward. On Friday the 13th, we had a game here under lights at Havelock Park where Havelocks took on a resurgent Army team. They've got a few new faces in their line as well. Rehan Veerakone came on later in the game as the fly half, but they started off with Upali Veerasinghe, who was their former captain, and he added a bit of impetus to the Army line. But unfortunately for the Army, they had the similar sort of day that Scotland had against the Welsh. They tried a lot, but they just couldn't get any luck, as Scotland couldn't from Glenn Jackson. Army just couldn't get anything out of referee Dinka Pires. In the end, they managed to get a penalty try under the post, which was a strange call, which a lot of us actually watching the game thought, because there was a kick through from the Army wing three-quarter Madhushankar, who had come on late in the game. He made a few threatening runs, but he put a grubber through, but there were plenty of defenders around Madhushankar, but the referee ruled that an obstruction would have resulted in a try, and they got a penalty try at the end of that game, which made the scoreboard read a little bit more favourably in favour of Army, which was at the end of the game, Havelocks 31, Army 23. But the game was not that close, because the Havelocks forwards really managed to do a lot in that game to sort out the Army offensive tactics, and that was really unfortunate for Army because they weren't able to match Havelocks at the breakdown. That was where they really lost the game. But Havelocks had Dhanushka Ranjan to thank. He scored 3 of the tries that they scored, and unfortunately went off injured. I'm sure coach Glenn Christini and the rest of the team hopes that Dhanushka Ranjan is very, very fit and back to be able to come and play their next game. So let's wait and see how that one goes. But it looked very much like they were dependent on Dhanushka Ranjan. But that doesn't matter, because Ranjan is just one of those players that you can look to spark something. And even in defense against Epi Kokanasia, he was outstanding in defense as well. So Ranjan was clearly the man of the match in that effort, scoring 3 of the 5 tries that Javi scored in the end. Dulaj Pereira also combining well with Williami Tahitua, and it looks very much like Javis have the best 10, 12, 13 combination in rugby at the moment. Kavindu de Costa sometimes plays well, sometimes is sporadic, so we'll have to wait and see whether he can match up to the more experienced campaigners that he comes up against. But I'm sure that this 9, 10, 12, 13 combination will be really good for Havelocks going forward. It would be great if Javis can get Sadun Herat back into the game a little bit more. He's a little isolated on the wing because it's not going right down to him as much as he would like. So it would be good for Sandhan to come off his wing, especially at loose play, and try and get his hands on the ball a little bit more, because he can break tackles if he hits the ball at momentum. But all in all, a good performance from the Havelocks team. They'll be very happy about it. Discipline is something that they need to ensure, because I think Mithun Hapugoda and Hiranta Pereira were both actually quite lucky to stay on the park for shoulder charge tackles, block tackles as we like to call them in the industry, and they were quite lucky not to get yellow cards from the referee at those occasions. So I think Coach Tristini has to address that defensive aspect, especially when they go out wide and the smaller men are up against the big men. They need to go low and use good tackle technique to prevent 14 men and prevent their team going down to 14 men. But they look like they have the goods to go all the way. They look like they're steadily improving with every game. So are they title contenders? I think so. Can they beat Navy and Kandy back to back? I actually think they do have the game if they don't succumb to the pressure, and that's where Muthutantri's leadership comes into play as well. So a little bit of experience that they're lacking in the forwards, and that's where I think they might come undone, if at all, because their backs look excellent. Then we had a game between Navy and Police down in Valisera, and Navy winning that one 29 points to 13, a fairly convincing win at the end for them, with the bonus point as well. And then we had another game up in Nithavala where Kandy SC played Air Force, and it ended up 66 points to 27 in favour of Kandy. So no surprises there. Kandy scoring almost not almost, he scored 10 tries at the end of the day, and Christopher Clutie got the second hat-trick of the weekend. Ranjan got one for Havelocks, and Clutie got one for Kandy as well, which moves him above Apisai Nangaliva of Police, above his try tally for the weekend, so for the league so far at least, and that means he's a top try scorer at the moment, so a devastating flanker in devastating form as well. But one thing that Kandy really need to think about when they analyze and reflect back on this game against Air Force is that their playing the bottom side in the table, and as a result of that, can they afford to concede 27 points to the bottom side? They conceded as many as 3 tries to Air Force and 2 penalties as well to go along with the 3 conversions. So that was something that Kandy, even late in the game, will be thinking about, because they've got to play the full 80 minutes. They've got to defend for that full 80 minutes against teams like Heavies, against teams like Kandy, against teams like Navy, if they want to have title aspirations. So one thing also with the tactical play of Kandy on the day, they've gone back to that throwing it wide to their men who can run on the outside. Anuruddha Villawara getting a lot of cutout passes and stuff like that. He's a great finisher, but Kandy need to have a little bit more structure in their play if they're going to meet defenses that drift well, that push them off the park and shift them laterally, and they've got to have people running some angles, and Koto Pongi's brute force is not going to be enough against teams with a good defensive power, which is what Navy and Kandy both have. So that's something that Kandy will have to look towards, and despite the fact that they scored 66 points up in Nithavala, they will definitely have to make sure that they play a little bit tighter, especially in defense. They can throw it all out wide if they want to in attack, but because Clutie is good enough to get around the park and make sure he's at every breakdown, it won't affect them too much. But we'll have to wait and see whether they can continue that sort of intensity, that sort of loose game, whether they can continue that against good sides. That's something Coach Johan Taylor would take a good look at, I think. And we've got our match preview for week 15 in the second round of the Dialog Rugby A Division League. We have Air Force taking on Police. Should be a pretty easy win for Police, even though they have to deal with the wind at that Ratmalana ground. And then the match of the weekend, I think CRNFC travelling or hosting Navy at the Longdon Place grounds. They'll want revenge for their defeat. They came back almost so close to beating Navy at Valisara in the first round, and they want to make good on that. They've already drawn against Kandy, so they'll have a lot of confidence from that effort. They've got a week off, so all their injuries will be back to normal as well. So let's wait and see. That game live on ThePapare.com is going to be a really interesting game to watch. Sia versus Navy live from Longdon Place on Saturday the 21st, and on Sunday we have Kandy who take on Army at Nithavala. And once again, the Army forwards will attack up front. Army should attack Kandy up front. That's where they are vulnerable, if at all. And if they put Christopher Clutie on the ground and force him to make tackles, that's where you will probably beat Kandy, because you want to make sure that Clutie is on the ground making tackles, and he's good enough actually to make the tackle and turn the ball over. So that's where Kandy have a huge advantage, in that they've got some real quality foreign players. They've got Oscar Uma, Christopher Clutie as well, and they've got backs also who can do the business and defend well. So Johan Taylor has brought his foreigners in well. He's plugged the holes that Kandy do have, and with Fazil Marija and the sort of form that he is in, I think Kandy should have it easy, except for the fact that they need a place kicker. Roshan Veeraratha really needs to improve his place kicking, and Nigel Ratwatha coming into the attack a little bit more often would be nice for Kandy fans to see as well. But up front is where they have the problem, and if Army are going to cause any issues for Kandy, up front is where they will have to try and do it. So that's a preview of the action for next week. We hope you enjoyed the action from last week. Don't forget, we're giving you 2 live games next weekend, Sia versus Navy and Kandy Army from Nithavala. So make sure you tune in to www.thepapare.com for a Dialog Rugby A Division League. Here's where we share the passion.